This is the fourth presentation where we've been looking at the letter of James. In the last presentation, we looked at the world of teaching. We need to remember that teaching was very different then to how it is today. We've got to strip away our modern Western ideas. But James looks at teaching, but looks at the wider issue of the influence we have on each other through what we say. It's central in the New Testament, sadly neglected today. What we say can bring enormous blessing to others, or it can create confusion and division. James enters that world. The problem is that within the Christian communities historically there have been divisions and dissensions, and if we look at the evidence, it's almost always that. Individuals or groups wanted to gain control. They wanted it their way or my way. And it's a sad story. James perhaps could foresee that possibility. We need to hang our heads in shame and get down on our knees and seek the Lord to put things right. There's still far too much of that. Well, so often people have abused theology and abused opportunities to teach, to push particular lines that they wanted. Perhaps got them a reputation, but it didn't bless the people. Yes, what we say has huge power. And so often things have been abused and have gone wrong. And that's the outcome. And we only have to look out today at the fractured state of our Christian communities, particularly in the West, caused by individuals and groups who've abused their authority. They were more interested in their own reputations, not the blessings of others. And things were framed to enlarge their sphere of influence. That's been the sad history, and that history still goes on. And the outcomes amongst God's people? Confusions, and indeed people drifting away. And we're no longer behaving the way we should, because we're not being given a correct balanced steer from leadership. That's James's answer drawn from Proverbs. The humble implies that we've got to be willing to seek something better, to put our house in order, to repent. And God will direct us. And God will direct us and lead us forward. Let's remember that James is speaking to that kind of an audience. Very tempting when you're under pressure to look out at those who are doing the oppressing and to say, if only we had power. Why does God allow them to get away with that? Why is life so unfair? If only we had some of their wealth, we could stand against them. Natural reaction. Faced with these circumstances, we argue with ourselves and with God, where is the justice in all of this? And indeed there is no justice, it's simply wrong. But we go on and say, well, when will God come and put things right? Why does he tolerate it? Why does he allow it? Why does he leave us in this situation? God never creates it. We humans create it. And that leads us on to our next bit. James says, now listen, you who say today or tomorrow we'll go out to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business and make money. Why, You don't even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You're a mist that appears for a while and then vanishes. Instead you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogant schemes. All such boasting is evil. If anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin for them. Now listen, you rich people. Weep and wail because of the misery that is coming on you. Your wealth has rotted, and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver have corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in the last days. Look, the wages you failed to pay the workers who mowed your fields are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened yourselves in the days of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the innocent one who was not opposing you. That was what was happening then, and it's still happening today. Those who have power, money, and possessions so often are exploiting and abusing others. And indeed, throughout the West, the rich get richer and the poor go to the wall. And if we look at the world level, the amount of the world's resources that are held by a handful of wealthy and powerful people, it's totally obscene. While in many countries there are those who literally are starving to death. James draws their attention to this great principle. Now listen. Now he's not talking to the rich people who are oppressing the people of God directly. He's addressing the people of God. And he's saying, you look out on these rich people who are oppressing you. You look at the people who are powerful in society, who treat you badly and abuse you. Well, don't seek to want to become like them. Don't seek their money. Don't seek their power. Don't seek to do what they're doing. It'll all fall apart in the end. James shows them what God is saying to those who are oppressing them from a position of wealth and power. It's an interesting comment that if you don't have wealth, position, power, it's not very often that you oppress anybody because you're not in a position to do it. The possession of wealth and power carries with it enormous responsibility to use that power for the benefit of others. So this is what it's all going to work out as. These people think they can run things without reference to God, but in the end life is transitory and you can't predict what lies round the corner. Oh, I see this in the West today. We don't need God. We can run our own affairs. We can do our own things. And look at the mess what ended up in. But those who don't have are always those who suffer most. And those who exploit others in their relentless pursuit of self-indulgence, they'll end up with nothing. They'll even lose their fundamental humanity. They've lost themselves. And you can see those in the West today who have extraordinary wealth, possessions, salary bonuses that are bigger than perhaps the entire salary that ordinary people can earn in a lifetime, and that's just the bonus. For what? They give it to each other. Relentless pursuit of self-indulgence. It never satisfies, and in the end, it's gone. James brings us to a position of reality. Got money, power, position, you can end up with that. So these people thought, we can go where we like, we can spend as much time here or there or do this or that. We can carry on business because everything is designed for this. And that culture has invaded the West. It's invaded the states that have begun to escape from communism. And it's invaded the Islamic world. The pursuit of materialism, things, possessions, power. And James says, well, that'll rot away. The moths will get it. The money will corrode. Now, these are pictures he's given, not literally. Wealth and possessions never satisfy. It is true to say that the more you have, the more you want. Better not to have than to abuse the power that money brings you. Oh, James deals with a very realistic problem. It was a real problem for the abused and oppressed people of God in his day, where they had so little, and they were being denied the ability to survive and live and eke out a living by those who did have, who for various reasons were keeping them down. But there is a danger. If you are being economically oppressed, and that is happening throughout the world today, where the followers of Jesus are being deliberately kept in poverty by those who are the oppressors. It's very marked in Islamic states. It also occurs in communist states. And there are signs of it happening in the West. But if you're being oppressed, you look out longingly and say, if only I had, if only. James is saying, no, that's not really the way. They're living in luxury and self-indulgence, and we hardly know where we're going to put bread on the table. But James is saying, they have everything, but nothing satisfies. They've gained everything at the abuse of others, but it will not last. There are wonderful people of God who've got so little. And yet, as I said to a group of them many years ago, you have nothing, but you have everything. And we talked and shared it. It's true, they had a peace and a happiness and a joy because they had Jesus and a meaning to life. And wealth can't bring that. That is certainly happening throughout the world today, ignored for decades by the media and our political masters, beginning to show signs of being acknowledged now, at last. But it's growing in the West. But James says that. Don't look enviously at their apparent planning and success. You may have nothing, but you have everything, because you have Jesus. And remember that, says James. You may wonder where God is in all of this, and God will not step in and overrule human free will just willy-nilly, because he would destroy the very nature of his creation. But God does hear the cries of the oppressed. He does hear, and he will answer. And in the end, those who are oppressing you, they are the ones who lose out, because they never found Jesus and meaning in life. Let's move on. James goes on to say, "Be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and spring rains. You too be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. Don't grumble against one another, brothers and sisters, or you'll be judged. The judge is standing at the door." Brothers and sisters, an example of patience in the face of suffering. Take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As you know, we count as blessed those who have persevered. You've heard of Job's perseverance, have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. The word there could be translated therefore, then. This is a conclusion to the previous two parts. Oppressed, looking out at those with wealth and power who are doing the oppressing. Don't envy them. Don't seek what they've got. Don't try to retaliate at their level. Now, the word that's translated there is the word that is used for the arrival of an emperor to be welcomed by his people. And it's the word that's always used for the return of Jesus. But it can be used for the arrival of any lord or emperor. His public arrival to put things right. And in the sense here that the farmer waits, the crops have been planted, they've grown, the rain has come, they're ripening, and then the harvest will come. What James is saying here is the Lord will come and sort this out. It doesn't necessarily refer to the return of Jesus. Yes, the return of Jesus, when he does return, he's going to come and put everything right. But it's more likely that what James is referring to here is that our memory, a reminder to the people there, Jesus will put it right. And perhaps James was remembering the prophetic teaching of Jesus, of the entire fall of the Jewish nation and the collapse of the temple system. And he realized that the oppression that was coming upon the people who'd come from the Jewish background, much of it was coming from their Jewish forebears. There were terrible consequences coming for their actions. God does come and put it right. We have to be patient. And that's how God sees you and me. There's a crop growing in the land, and that's you and me. It's valuable. It'll bring benefit to many. But it takes time to grow and develop, to mature. Just be patient. And yet, faced with oppression, faced with all the problems, there's such a danger of this. The word really carries the idea of a sighing or yearning. We're kind of arguing with each other and say, oh, why doesn't God do this? Why won't you do this, do that? Why doesn't this happen? It's a longing for something better. Understandable, but James says, no, that's not the way. Be patient. And the word patient, patience, persevered, perseverance, carries a clear, strong message. Don't get uptight about it. Don't grumble. Don't sigh. Don't yearn. Don't look over your shoulder for something better. Wait patiently. Don't get angry about it. Keep on going. Keep on going. Keep on going. Remember, you're a valuable crop. And Jesus will come and put things right. There is justice, and he will bring it. What a wonderful, beautiful picture how much strength it gives us when we're faced with the oppression that's coming at us from outside. That's what Jesus said. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. That's happening in the West. It's happening in communist lands. It's happening big time in Islamic lands. It's really tough. Jesus says, rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. Look, in the long run, Jesus will come and put things right. Remember what they did to the prophets who were before you. Isaiah spent an entire life speaking to the people, and God warned them at the outset they wouldn't listen. Jeremiah expended energy and time speaking to the people, and he ended up in prison for a while and then taken away to Egypt against his will. Great men and women of God, the great prophets of the past. Hang on, says James. Hang on, says Jesus. The people to whom James is writing were living through this economic oppression. And that's what it can do to us. Understandable. James says, no, don't go that way. We're impatient. How long? Why does God not do something? Remember, you're a precious crop. It takes time to reach maturity. And too often in our frustration, we take it out within our groups. These are not the ways, says James. That's the key message to remember. In the long run, God will put it right. He always does. There is justice. There always is. And if you ponder it, if there was not justice in the long run, the whole world would be an unethical, immoral mess. And that's not the world God made. There is a final accounting. Things are put right. There is overall justice. Look at the life of Job. He lost everything. But in the end, he got everything back, doubled. There is justice. God is always just. And he will act. But he's not going to intervene and push around and break the free will of people. He made us that way. But in this life or in the hereafter, there is overall justice. We need to hang on to that and not take the law into our own hands. We move to the final stretch, which is a set of final bits of direction and advice. They kind of fire at us. It's almost like an afterthought. Now, here's a few points to remember as I finish this letter. Hang on to your integrity at all costs in everything. When everything falls apart in life, God's there. When things start to come together, keep God right in the center of the frame. When illness strikes, and in those days illness striking probably would mean penury, and a family would scarcely survive, James points the way to seek spiritual help. God is there to heal. And when we do mess up and miss the mark in life, confess to each other and help each other. Now that requires a lot of trust. Now it's nothing to do with confession in the formal religious sense. This is confessed to each other. All are involved. We all mess up, and we need to be there to help each other and pray for each other. And when you're in trouble, within the little group, we've got to be there for each other, not to criticize, not to condemn, we're all in the same boat, but to be there for each other, to help each other, to put each other back on the right track, to support each other in difficult times. Whole lot of little bits of advice, and yet they're built around that. God is there for us. Draw on his resources and release that power to each other and support each other. Looking at the text, above all. Now that kind of phrase is almost in the sense of, well, before I forget, let me just draw your attention to these things. Above all, my brothers and sisters, do not swear, not by heaven or by earth or by anything else. All you need to say is a simple yes or no, otherwise you will be condemned. Your integrity. Is anyone among you in trouble? Let them pray. Is anyone happy? Let them sing songs of praise. Is anyone among you ill? Let them call the elders of the church to pray over them. Anoint them with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer offered in faith will make the sick person well. The Lord will raise them up. And if they have sinned, they'll be forgiven. Therefore confess your sins to each other. Pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. Elijah was a human being, even as we are. He prayed earnestly that it would not rain. It did not rain in the land for 3.5 years. Again he prayed, and the heavens gave rain, and the earth produced its crops. My brothers and sisters, if one of you should wander from the truth, and someone should bring that person back, remember this: whoever turns a sinner from the error of the way will save them from death and cover over a multitude of sins. We have to be there for each other. Back to a reminder. That's the group. They didn't have power. They didn't have money. They were struggling to survive. They're being hammered from the Roman authorities' side. They're being hammered from the Jewish nation side. The attempt was to starve them out of existence. And that is happening in the world today, particularly to followers of Jesus in Islamic lands. They were under pressure. James says, live in your integrity. Don't stoop to their level. God is there to see you through. And you need each other. Oh, trusting each other at that level is really difficult to develop and achieve. And it's so easily lost. It requires a level of mutual respect and integrity for each other. Nobody in any sense seeing themselves as superior. We're all there for each other. If we translate it a little bit, in the world today, this is what is happening. In many countries, the political rulers of the countries are making life misery for the followers of Jesus. It's growing in Russia. It's growing in India, where a government there has got a policy of making every Indian a Hindu. It's strongly present in China and other communist lands. And in the Islamic world, pressure is being placed upon anyone who's not a Muslim, because the goal is to force them to become a Muslim. So businesses are boycotted. People are denied opportunities in all kinds of public jobs to get promotion or even to be employed. companies will not employ people for more than a limited amount of time unless they're a Muslim. So it goes on. And the followers of Jesus are under economic pressure. We just have to look at the bonded labour in the brickworks of Pakistan. That's brutal. And it's being done to the followers of Jesus. Fade that out in the Western world. You don't conform to political correctness, which may contradict all the known evidence. That's ignored. If you don't conform to it, you might lose your job. Certain jobs will not be open to you. You'll be vilified in the media. While at the same time, there's the persistent demands from a minority in the West that their way's right, and they demand the right to have it and it to be imposed on others. Pressures are coming. Now, if we look at the book of James overall, in this final section, so often historically we've ripped verses out of a context and we've westernized them. Now, if we do that, we lose the depth of the meaning that James carries for us today. We have to remember that James is speaking to a specific audience in a specific context with specific needs. And it was a long time ago. The culture was very different. But human beings do not change. And the oppression that was there then has reappeared today. So there's great value in seeing it in a more holistic sense, seeing how it would have meant to the early hearers, and then seeing how it applies for us today. We get a greater depth out of it. These Christians, a sect of Judaism, that's how they were considered. The Roman emperor demanding the loyalty to the state eventually ended up in emperor worship. While the Jewish people were oppressing those who had left Judaism to become Christians. They were being hammered. Put it into modern cultures of today. A wider society which misunderstands and misrepresents. Oh, I'm horrified at the misrepresentation of the ways of Jesus that I read in Islamic literature, that I see in Western media. And the way in the West, the oppression comes if we don't follow the ways society imposes. But that's a normal pattern in the communist and Islamic world. And those who are following Jesus are particular targets of violent abuse. This is true throughout the world. The vast majority of persecution directed for religious reasons is directed at the expense of Christians, not other religions, despite the way the media so often present it. The Christians in the world are being hammered. But what James is saying, how do we react to that lot? That's tough. But Jesus prophesied and predicted it was going to happen. We're under pressure. Hang on to that. God doesn't send it, but he can turn it to advantage for your blessing and mine. Because it can lead to maturity. Let the Holy Spirit develop maturity in you. That's what Jesus said. He knew it would happen. History shows it has happened, and it is happening today. Under pressure, James says, we get confused and puzzled what it's all about. Ask God. So we can see under the radar what's really happening. Not because we're clever, comes from God. That's what James says. When it doesn't make sense, ask God. Under pressure, never ever blame God. God never sends anything, whether it's oppression or illness or disasters. He never ever ever sends that. God is love. These are created by humans. But remember, that's God's goal. And no matter what life throws at you, and it may be you're going through horrendous experiences at this very moment, no matter what these are, hang on. God can take you through. Get him alongside, get him back in the center of the frame. He can take you through whatever life can throw at you, because God is love. And if you ponder it, when there's love, fear gets driven out. We are so often fearful. Let the love of God envelop us. His agenda is the best for us, no matter what life may throw at us. He can take you through. Under pressure, that's our natural instinct. Particularly when what's being done is such a clear injustice, as it so often is. Jesus never retaliated, ever. And James reminds us, let's be patient and persevere, leave it to God to put things right at the end. The end may be very soon. The end may be in the far distant. We may not see the end in our lifetime, but God will put it right. There is justice in the eyes of God. God is the God of justice. Don't retaliate, in these wonderful words of Jesus, and he lived them out even when they tortured him publicly to death. Pray for those who persecute you. And there are some wonderful, wonderful pictures of godly and wonderful people who are being oppressed and persecuted brutally in other lands. And you're still praying for those who are brutalizing them. That's the way of Jesus. By his grace we can do it. Under pressure, we look over our shoulders at those who are oppressing us, and sometimes we wish we had some of their wealth and power that we could stand against it. No, that's not the way either, says James. You yourself, you are of infinite value. You are precious, a precious harvest. We're all of equal value in God's eyes. God's ways are not to work through wealth and power that comes from wealth. God works through people, where we get him back in the center of our life's frame. You remember the story Jesus told? The man who piled up wealth. And then that night he lost his life. And he lost everything. A salutary lesson, an important lesson for us today. Let's get our priorities right. And even within our Christian groups, we long to get more money to be able to do things, a better building, to do this, that, and the other. We think these hold the answers. No, they don't. The answers lie in human beings. When we put Jesus back at the center of the frame and live for him, a life of love and graciousness, depending on his power. Under pressure, and at the end James paints a picture. When we're under pressure in our small groups, you may be in a part of a small fellowship, you're weak, you see so little growth, Everything's stacked against you. That's where your strength lies. Each other. And the little set of staccato commands at the end from James. These are very, very precious. They're so easy to destroy. They're hard won. That's how Paul puts it. Now it takes a bit of pondering. How on earth can you submit to one another? There is no top dog, there is no boss, there is no leader. In a spiritual sense, that's true. We are all one in Christ. We are all equal. We're all of equal value before God. Jesus is the boss. He's in control. He is the Lord of glory. And we seek the best for the other. Always under him. That's what's happening in the church. We are split, fractured, divided. That's why it happens, and it's still happening today. We think we've got it right, and the group round the road has got it wrong. We want it our way. And James reminds us. Sad story, isn't it? All the theology of the late 19th, 20th century, the damage it's done in the West. Built up reputations of people, destroyed the people of God. And it's happening at the local level as well. And we love to be on the platform at the front with power, with reputation. And against all that, these final words hold the key. We need unity. We need to value each other. We need to stop striving for our way, our reputation. We need to learn to share, to trust, to help each other, and to take each other together through the oppression that's all around. Oh, let's get our integrity back in the center of the frame. Straight honesty. God's there for us. He's done wonderful things for us in Jesus. But let's learn how to pray for each other. This is not some leader doing it. It's praying for each other. Supporting each other, never condemning, never criticizing, being there for each other, helping each other through the tough times of life. Even when we mess up completely, there are those there to carry us through, to take our hands and take us back onto the path again, to point us in the right direction and to support us. It requires trust. Deep trust. Then in the midst of oppression, we can carry the truth of Jesus into the world. That is the answer from the book of James for the people of God today under oppression.